All right, hey everybody. We got about 30 seconds till we start. Our email went out as a reminder. It looks like just now, so people should start trickling in. Thank you guys so much for being here. Let me know in the comments. Just say hey, introduce yourself. Let me know where you're watching from and if you currently use tracks. Looks like JR is here. Hey JR. He is currently using Ableton with tracks. Awesome. Chris is here from Athens, Georgia, currently using Ableton to run tracks and Automate Pro Presenter at his church. Awesome. Welcome to you guys that are worship leaders, music directors in churches out there. Welcome to you guys that are not, that are just MDs and bands. Thanks so much for being here. Marcelo is here. He says he's currently using tracks and processing vocals for live acts. Awesome. But he's controlling from session view, so I want to see the advantages of using it in arrangement view. Awesome, Marcelo. Yeah, I hear more and more people that are using Ableton for vocal processing and doing vocal stuff. So really, really cool. And Joe, hey Joe. Joe is a subscriber, right, Joe? I'm pretty sure Joe's a subscriber. So what's really cool from Studio Stage, if you haven't heard of it, I launched the site almost 8 months ago, and we hit 100 subscribers this week, 100 paid subscribers, which is awesome. But I was looking at our customers today and realized there's a lot of customers that I no longer know, and I don't recognize their name, which is kind of sad to me. It started as a small little family, and it is growing, which is great. That's a great problem to have. But I believe Joe's a subscriber. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. But thank you all for being here. This is going to be a really, really fun webinar. So the goal of this webinar, the whole focus of this, is to talk about this right here. And that is how to easily have freedom and flexibility with tracks and without spending tons of time. So that is really our focus. It's all about having freedom and flexibility in using tracks without spending tons of time. And I'm going to dig a bit into that in just a moment. But a couple housekeeping things before we get going. Again, thank you so much for being here. Thanks so much to Presonus for sponsoring this webinar. I love doing this stuff. When I can get a sponsor, it's free. When it's not, it's normally about $20, so it's still pretty affordable. But really thankful that they stepped in and did that. I'm going to talk in a moment about this guy, this Presonus Atom controller, which I'm going to be using for the webinar. Really, really enjoying it. A lot of fun. Great controller. A couple housekeeping things up front, and then we will dig into this. Again, continue letting me know where you're watching from. Joseph is here. Let me know where you're watching from, and let me know if you are using tracks currently. So a couple housekeeping things. One, this is being recorded. So if you have to leave early, if you can only come in for a bit, that's okay. It's being recorded. You will get a link to the recording tomorrow emailed to you as soon as this is done, first thing tomorrow morning. So make sure you're registered. You can register using the link over on YouTube. Let's see if I can get over here and show you this just so that you guys see this and make sure I got the right one. 1 second here. There we go. Okay. So using this link right here, register for access. Whoa, this is weird. This is like a Inception kind of deal. But use this link right here to register for access. And in doing that, you're going to make sure that you get the replay first thing tomorrow morning in your inbox. Now, along with that replay, you're going to get a link to my notes. So I'm going to share a lot of videos or talk about videos that I have links to, or tutorials that are free, or courses or whatever. There's going to be a lot. So there's going to be times where I'll try to hop in the chat and post links to that. I'll be able to at some points, won't be able at other points. But don't worry, if you are registered using that link I showed earlier, in the description of this video, you're going to get the replay delivered right to you. You're going to get my notes, which is going to be great. And I also have a special offer for you guys. So hang out at the end. The goal of this webinar is not to try to sell you on anything. I've been to a lot of webinars where, the whole goal is to just delay getting to the end so that they can try to upsell you on something and get you in this email thing to eventually say, time's running out. Make sure to subscribe before time runs out. That's not the goal of this webinar. The goal of this webinar is to share 4 things that are going to help you learn to flow with tracks. Really practical, really simple stuff. That's the goal of this. But I do have a special offer for you that has to do with the site, but you have to be registered in order to get that. And I'm going to share that info at the end. And then finally, I don't know that I mentioned this everywhere, but for those of you that have registered, yes, you'll get a replay. Yes, you will get my notes. But you are also entered to win a free 1-year subscription to From Studio Stage. So I'm going to draw for that at the end. You have to be registered. So if you haven't registered yet, go ahead and click that link to register to make sure that you are in for the drawing. All right, cool. How's your guys' night going? Hope it's going well for you. I was in DC last week. I met my buddy Kurt. I don't know if Kurt is watching, but was visiting a museum with my family and connected with Kurt, who watches a lot of From Studio Stage stuff. So that was really fun. But came back. We had a great time walking around DC. Super excited to hit the ground running this week, get back into creating content, get back into doing this webinar. So if you just joined me, again, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and let me know if you are currently using tracks. And again, for those of you that are just coming, the goal of this webinar, the goal of everything we are going to talk about, is how to easily have freedom and flexibility with tracks without spending tons of time. Two things really are important to me that I want to stress going into this. I'm going to try to really focus on the easy part, and the not spending tons of time part. So why does all this matter? So to me, the reason all this matters is I want to be able to tell the robots what to do. This is a phrase I say all the time, but essentially I want to talk about playing with tracks, not two tracks. That's something I'm really passionate about. I don't often like playing two tracks. I don't often like being told, okay, play less here. Don't play that part here so that the tracks can play that. Now, I'm a fan of using the tracks to kind of serve what we're doing. A podcast episode a couple weeks ago, we talked about how real musicians don't use tracks. It's kind of saying that half mockingly or very mockingly, but kind of broke down why I think people should use tracks and why that doesn't make you a bad musician. One of the things I kind of laid out there was using tracks to create a sound. That's a big thing to me, using tracks to create a sound. So I'm a big fan of that, but within that, I want to play with the tracks, not to the tracks. I want to use the tracks to create a sound. I don't want to use the tracks to play to and be stuck to an arrangement. The other part of this that doesn't take tons of time, I don't care how great your setup is. If it takes hours to do, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Now, that's just personal preference. You may be in a life stage where you can spend hours and hours getting your Ableton set built and ready. So I asked a question today on Instagram, just asking people, how long do you spend in Ableton every week? Most people's response, a couple hours, few hours, 3 hours. Did that on Facebook as well too, just to get an idea of how much time people spend in Ableton each week. I used to spend probably 5 to 6 hours in Ableton every single week, and even longer than that when I was creating my own content, building sets. This was when I was on staff at a church doing this, and it was a lot of fun. But I got to a point where my wife and I had kids. We had twins. They're 6 now, so this was 6 years ago. Everything was great. Then we had twins. My job responsibilities got busier at the church. I just did not have the time that I used to have, and just didn't have the ability to sit down and spend hours doing tracks anymore. So I needed to find a way that's really efficient, that doesn't take hours. So that's the goal of what I hope to talk about today and share with you. It should be simple. I'm not a very smart guy, so I can't have a lot of stuff going on. I want, just 4 buttons on my MIDI controller, and we'll talk about adding some stuff to that. But I need things very, very simple. Now, if you are a playback tech, and by that you're someone that stands off stage doing Ableton and running tracks, then yeah, you have both hands free. You have multiple computers. I've got a video with my buddy J-Mix that I'm going to release very, very soon. I think I mentioned in a podcast a few weeks ago that I pre-recorded that I said it was out already. It's not. But J-Mix, Jonathan Mix from Elevation Church and Elevation Worship, a band that kind of travels. He's got a really cool setup where he's doing a lot of stuff and using his redundant rig in a very unique way. And that's one of the reasons I want to recapture the video and walk through how he's doing what he's doing, because he's doing redundancy in a very unique way and using a Play Audio 12 SW8 in a very unique way, which is great. But Jonathan has a very complex setup. He'll admittedly say it's very complex. He can do that because he's off stage. And I joke about this in the video, but I can help you do a lot of what Jonathan is doing with 4 buttons on your MIDI controller. And I want to show you how to do that. Tonight in this webinar. So if you are MD on stage, if you're doing this on your own as a drummer, as a keys player, as a guitar player, as a worship leader, as a vocalist, you need something that's simple. You need something that's not going to take hours to do, and something that's going to be pretty straightforward. Let me know, similar to what I asked on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook earlier, how long does it take you to prep your set in Ableton? No shame here. No judgment here. But let me know in the comments if you're currently using tracks, you're building your set in Ableton. Let me know, how long does it currently take you to get your songs together, to build your set in Ableton so you can step on stage, hopefully with flexibility. You might be here going, it's taking me a couple hours, but I have no flexibility. But hopefully you do have some flexibility. Let me know in the comments, how long does it take you in Ableton to get your set ready currently. Chase, thanks for being here. Joseph, thanks for being here. Christian, he is using tracks, thanks for being here. Joseph says 1 to 2 hours a week. That's not bad. I want to hopefully show you, Joseph, how to shrink that even further. Well, we won't get so much into shrinking the time. We'll talk about flexibility, freedom, that won't take too long. Chris says, used to be 3 to 4 hours, but I figured out a system where it takes about an hour. That's not bad. A little longer now that I'm adding in Pro Presenter cues, Marcelo, maybe 3 hours previous each show. So yeah, just to set this up for you guys. And it's funny, someone sent me an article about a week ago where someone was comparing session and arrangement view. I think they did a pretty poor job of it. But one of the things they mentioned was, it takes this long to build a set in this view, this long to build a set in this view. And I thought, well, it really depends what you're doing. Chris said he's adding in Pro Presenter cues, so his time might take a little longer. Now, there's still some hacks and some tricks and some things that I think could shrink that amount of time. But it kind of depends on what you're doing, how long your set takes. But for me, on average, I can build a weekly set in 10 to 15 minutes. Now, when it comes to formatting a song completely from scratch, brand new song, that's 10 to 15 minutes. If I'm doing Pro Presenter cues, doing a lot of automation stuff, that's anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. Now, granted, that's doing this and this kind of process over about because at this point, if my kids are 6, I really started this 5 years ago, kind of this process of how I do things now. And so that's kind of my average time. And that's with everything I'm going to show you tonight that we're doing. Joe says takes me about 20 minutes per song file, 30 minutes for the set file if I move fast. Yeah, it doesn't have to take that long. Joe says we only use Ableton for tracks, no Pro Presenter or lighting cues. Great. So keep dropping in the comments. Let me know how long it takes you guys to build your set in Ableton. A couple things, and then we are going to get to it. Here's a couple things we're going to talk about tonight just to set it up. One, changing tempo key in the moment. You may have thought about changing tempo before, but possibly not key. I'm going to show you how to do that in the moment. Let me even pause before I get to this. Some of the stuff I'm going to show you should be used with discretion. I often joke with MDs that when they let their artist or their worship leader, whoever they're working with, or their singer know, hey, you can repeat anything and I'll follow. You could change the key and I'll follow. You could change the tempo and I'll follow. Sometimes it makes our job a little more intensive, and some of the things we can do is like crazy, right? So we're going to talk about this stuff. You probably shouldn't, let's see, what is today? Today is Wednesday. If you rehearse tomorrow on Thursday, you probably shouldn't turn right around and try to do this on Thursday. But still, it's going to be fun. We're going to have a great time. So we're going to talk about changing key, tempo in the moment. Again, I'm going to show you the 4 MIDI mappings that you need to use on your MIDI controller. We'll talk about some other optional ones we can add in, how to repeat song sections with one button, how to have what I call a flow moment. I hear that term a lot in church stuff, but I see it outside of church. Sometimes it's called just kind of a spontaneous moment, or just a hang on this, we're going to jam, whatever you want to call it. Essentially, this idea of getting to the end of the song, or maybe even in the middle of the song, just having click continue to go, looping endlessly, and then going to any other part of the song. I'm going to show you how to do that again with 4 buttons on your MIDI controller, and we'll expand from there. I'll give you a couple options to expand. And then I'm going to show you how to skip around your arrangement in the moment, again, using only 4 buttons, there we go, on your MIDI controller. Another disclaimer before we go on. Joseph says, if Dwight Schrute was holding a beat to his head, he'd say sub 60 minutes. You better get faster than that, Joseph. Dwight, we've seen what Dwight can do. So Chase said he's watching me because he's done all my sets, Pro Tools and Studio One. Occasionally want to learn how to do an Ableton. I have a bunch of friends who use it and love it. Well, awesome. Welcome, Chase. I'm a big fan of Studio One. You can see is my Atom controller here, which I'll tell you about in a moment. Not so much a fan of Pro Tools, nothing against people that are, but I've never had a whole lot of success with it. But Ableton is a lot of fun. So we're going to talk about how to do that. Again, talking about primarily 4 things today. You're going to walk away with 4 very, very practical things to apply. So let's start talking about how to flow with tracks. The very first thing that I want you to get, that I want you to start doing, and again, so for Chase is coming in new, not using Ableton. Some of this stuff is going to feel a little over your head. This isn't a A to Z Ableton tracks course, but I do have a lot of links I'm going to try to share with you guys in the chat as we go. I have links. I'm going to link to courses that we have as part of our all access subscription, free tutorials that I've done. So there's going to be stuff that's going to fill in around this, but we only have about an hour. So some of this stuff, I apologize to Chase. Anyone of you that are brand new, that you might feel like, man, you're starting, like you didn't start here, you started here. We're going to try to fill in some of those gaps, but let's get to it. So the very first thing I want to encourage you guys to start doing is warping your stems, okay? If you're not using stems, I want you to learn how to warp your audio file. If it's a single audio file, if it's a single click track file, if it's a single pad file, I want you to start warping that. And here's why. Now, first, let me go ahead and see if I can pop this in the chat so you guys can follow along. So we just wrapped up last week a 4-video kind of series on warping and what warping is. And essentially what warping is it's the way Live treats audio. Live treats audio like it's elastic. It has this particular worldview that audio should be able to play in any key, any tempo at any time. And so warping is very, very powerful. And so I want to encourage you to warp your stems. Now, why in the world should you warp your stems? Warping your stems allows your stems to sync to the grid. And you'll see that's really beneficial here in a moment. Allows us to repeat things seamlessly, allows us to change key and tempo really quickly, and more importantly, live in the moment, which is really, really cool. So let's hop into our Ableton session here, and we'll start walking through a few things. So here's my session. Here's some stems. If you're a part of our course, so Joe earlier, who is a subscriber, he has probably heard this song many, many times. You heard it in the intro as you were all walking in. This is an original song of mine called Dream. I use this often for examples. You're going to hear it a lot tonight. I apologize. But let me walk through what this is and why I like warping. So here's my files loaded in. Let me just play kind of this main A section for you guys so you can hear it real quick. Okay, so super straightforward song, kind of an instrumental electronic thing. I've got a click track loaded in. I've got various stems loaded in. This song is at 95 BPM. Now, if I were to click on one of these individual stems though, look right here at this button, this warp button. So what that means is I enabled warp, which means that these stems, the way they're currently functioning, and again, watch some of these tutorials to get some of the behind the scenes here. Super straightforward to warp your stems. But one of the benefits of when you select all your stems and you warp them this way is they're going to sync to Live's tempo, right? So they're going to sync and they're going to follow whatever Live's tempo is. Now, there's some tricks, some hacks that I use in Arrangement View so that I can drag in what I call a tempo track. If you've seen a lot of my content before, you know what a tempo track is, but it's this idea of having one file where all my files sync to that. I can have Ableton follow my stems and follow the tempo, but here's a really cool thing. If we just leave stuff the way it is, these stems are warped. I have all the stems warped. They're set to follower, which means they are going to follow Live's tempo up here, which the original tempo is 95. I could click and play this. Let's just drop this down to 90. I'm gonna go up here to Live's global tempo and hit 90. Hear kind of this subtle slowdown. Let's go in further. This is going to be drastic and sound a little silly, but let's go to 80. So what's really cool about that, we're at 80 BPM and it doesn't sound awful, right? Like the quality isn't completely degraded. The song kind of works, like it's not as great, I think, at 80 as it is at 95. And I think this song originally started at about like 85. I think I started around here. Let's see. Yeah. So it kind of started as a little slower song, and then I bumped it up to 95 kind of in the process of creating this, and I went, okay, this is really great. So here's a big reason to warp. When you warp, you can change key, tempo of your content. But what it allows you to do is Live in the moment. Press this because it's synced to Live's grid. Watch what it can do. So this is like the A section. It's going to play. Okay. And then because of something called global quantization, I'm going to click that B section locator. We'll talk about locators in a moment. And it's going to automatically jump there, but it doesn't do it immediately. It waits till the downbeat of 1. So warping your stems allows you to change key, allows you to change tempo, but it syncs everything to the grid. And in syncing everything to the grid, it's going to give you that flexibility to jump around, again, with locators. And we're going to talk about locators here in a moment. Now, one of the things I want to show you, though, that's cool about this kind of being live in the moment thing is this idea of using live's tap tempo to change your tempo to whatever tempo you are currently playing to. So let's set up this hypothetical situation. You're in a band, you have your set, you have certain songs. Maybe you have a song that is the song that is the song everyone knows. You're a band that travels. You're playing at a small theater. This is like your number one hit. Everyone knows the song. They love to sing it. So instead of just playing to tracks, just doing the thing the way you normally do, you kind of want it to flow and have flexibility every night. Now, one thing I want to encourage you, for some reason, some people idolize the idea of your tempo varying pretty consistently during a song as if that's somehow better. I don't think that's normally better, especially with most, and I hate using this term, but most modern music. A lot of times it's meant to play at a steady tempo. So that's not what I mean by this, but you start a song and you go, you know what, this night the crowd is singing a little slower. We want to do it a little faster. Then your tracks can do that, right? You have the flexibility to do that as opposed to just pressing play and being stuck to it. So let me show you how I'm doing that. So let's get back over into Ableton. And what I have done previously, if I just go to Command M here, up in the right-hand corner, kind of hard to see because of my logo, but right up here, this MIDI button, let's see if I can drop this down for a second so you guys can see this. There we go. This MIDI button, upper right-hand corner there, that is the button that when you click on that or do Command M, Control M if you're on a PC, that is going to allow you to use your MIDI controller with Ableton Live. I'm going to share a link to how to set that up in a moment. To free tutorial as well as a course where I'll share how to set that up in just a moment. Let's bring our logo back. There we go. But what I've done is I have gone ahead and taken my Atom controller and I've mapped a few different things here. I don't want to give away some of my other controls, but essentially I have play, right? And then I have tap tempo mapped up here. So what I can do, let's see if I can, if I'm good enough to do this at the same time. Go ahead and press stop. So I'm starting at the beginning. Let's imagine we're doing our song. We start the audience singing it, or we just kind of start out playing. Then we get to the tempo we kind of want this to be set to. And then we get to basically, we're kind of holding a somewhat steady tempo. Then we get to about the last measure of what we're doing. Or we get to a point where we're about to pause and we need click to come in. However you do it, however the song's set up. All you have to do is just hit this tap tempo 4 times and that song is going to start that tempo. So just as a reminder, this is our current tempo, 85, which actually isn't our original tempo. Again, our original tempo is 95. So I'm just going to use this tap tempo because my stems are already warped. All I have to do is just, I'm going to move it so I can hit it a little better. All I have to do is just pick a tempo. Let's speed up a little. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're at 91 BPM. You can see that upper left-hand corner of the screen. Oop, let's get our stems back. 1 second. There we go. See that up in the upper left-hand corner of our screen there, 91.33 BPM. And again, now I don't necessarily suggest doing this while your stems are playing, but you 100% could. Let me fix that so that doesn't bother. 1 second, folks. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain who needs to delete a lot of his key mappings. Get rid of this. There we go. All right. So, got that going. Let's just tap maybe a little faster. 1, 2, 3, right? So we sped up to 97. Now that actually didn't sound bad. And again, my tracks are still going, which is really, really cool. So let me show you another thing that we can do here. So that is with our tempo, and we see how straightforward it is to do that, just to hit tap and everything's good to go. But what about keys? So you get into a moment. Again, let's say it's kind of the same moment as we were in before. You've got your set, you have your song selected, but maybe you're with a worship leader or you're with an artist that just wants to go wherever they want to go. So they just pick a song and they go there. That's a reason I love Arrangement View. I load all my songs in. If I'm in a situation like that, I'll load all my songs into what I call a master set. So I have all the content there. And then I just select whatever song I want to go to next, or I use little MIDI clips to select and call up my next song. You could also use Setlist by Strange Electronic, which is a great app. Anyway, you get to your next song, but let's say that they want to go to the 7th song in the set, but that's normally in the key of D. This song that we're listening to now is in the key of D. They want to do it in the key of C because it's coming right out of the previous song. And again, this is all happening spontaneously in the moment. Now watch what's going to happen. I want to draw your attention to this button right here, this transpose button right here. Watch that. So this is in the key of D, so I know it's in the key of D. So I'm going to reach up to, let me show you this. I'm going to reach up to this knob that I have assigned. Where is it? Right here. This is really hard to do this way. And I'm just going to turn it till it drops down a whole step, right? So I was in the key of D. I want to go to the key of C, going down 2 half steps equals 1 whole step, 2 semitones in the language of Ableton. Going down 2 semitones to a whole step. Now I could press stop. I could press play. I'm at a completely different tempo than I started. I'm in a completely different key than when I started. So let's see what we have for that. Oh, and it looks like I missed a mapping on some of these. So you get to see me in the moment. Let's fix this. Let's select all this stuff. And I shouldn't really map this for my drum stuff, but we're going to try it anyway. There we go. So now we can do this. Again, let's bring it down just a whole step there. And let's press play. Let's go ahead and start on this big part. Okay. Looks like I missed something maybe. No, we're good to go. I think we got everything. So this is in the key of C. I could, again, 100% do not do this, but I could change this in a moment. Bring that back up. Oops. Let's grab all these again. And let's bring it up. There we go. So got all those guys brought back up. And all I did to do that was just selected all those clips, assigned my pitch to each of those. Sometimes you might have to go through to each one of these and make sure you've got the pitch selected. You may have to go and select all those clips, but then when you turn that, it's going to change the transpose on all your clips for you, which is really cool. Again, I don't suggest doing that live in the moment. You could technically decide you want to change key, I guess, and as you're doing it, just suddenly decide, hey, let's jump to a completely different key at this point. Probably not a great idea, but you could do that if you wanted to. So again, first thing I want you to take away in order to flow with tracks is to warp your tracks. Warping your tracks is going to sync them to the grid. Don't think of syncing to the grid meaning you are like stripping out all your flexibility. It doesn't mean you're stripping out your tempo changes. You are not if you have tempo changes. It just means everything is synced to the grid so that, again, if I jump back over just one more time to show you guys, if I jump back over into Ableton here, 1 second, there we go. I can be playing this, starting the B section here. And I can just decide I want to jump back to the intro just by clicking that. Because I am synced to the grid, because everything is in time, and because of global quantization, I have the freedom and flexibility to jump around, change my key, change my tempo. So that's number one. First thing I want you to start doing is warping your content. Check out those links in the chat on how to warp content. And we have 4 videos. Then we have an entire course. I don't know if I linked to that. I don't think I did. Called Understanding Live's, what do we call it? Understanding How Live Treats Audio, Warping, right? It's warping, understanding how live treats audio, where I really break down warping. I think it's one of the most misunderstood things in Ableton Live, and that's a really great way to do it. I missed a comment earlier from Dimitri. He says, oh, he retracted his message. I don't know what he says then. Sorry, I must have missed that, Dimitri. Feel free to post it again, unless you said something offensive. In any case, post it multiple times. Marcelo, though, says, I have a question about the tempo. Is it possible to create an automation to change the global tempo when you shoot each marker of the different songs, for example? Yes. So, Marcelo, go back and watch my content of how to save your tempo in Ableton Live's arrangement view, which is creating a tempo track. And that way it saves with your file. And as you change your song, you change tempos. It's the idea of building a set with multiple songs. And when you go to song 2, it's at a certain tempo, which is a great idea. So check out, just Google tempo track. You'll see any of the videos I've done on that, or the 3 or 4 people that have copied my content talking about that. And you can find that. If you go to the site, it's the very first tutorial I did. And I have a free tempo track you can download and use for that. But that's that's a great question, Marcel. It's a great way to do it, is to save your tempo with that. You are welcome. So first thing, warp your songs. Go through those warping tutorials I shared earlier. Warp your content. 2, use arrangement view. Now, let me take just a moment here to give you a little bit of context. This is a bit like Wirecutter. If you've gone there and you've looked at like what's the best washing machine to get? What's the best dryer to get? And before they get into it, they tell you why they're qualified to make this statement. Give me 2 minutes. I want to set this up. So when I first started using Ableton Live, I was producing music. I was just in my bedroom. I'm not producing music like my buddy Ill Factor. Ill's like, making music for artists all the time and getting into commercials and stuff. I'm in my bedroom making tracks just for the fun of it, right? Recording original music. I get started with Ableton that way. Then I start using Ableton for tracks in a band setting. When I was learning how to do it, all I had as a reference is what DJs did. And DJs go into session view and they create clips and they trigger individual clips to build kind of these things in the moment, and then combine scenes and they perform in that way. And so I kind of adapted that for a live band performance, and it worked really, really well for me in the moment. But then as I changed and was in different scenarios with different bands where people would start to say, hey, let's repeat this chorus. And I'd go, okay, I got to do a little bit of work, and then I'd chop everything up and I'd have all my different scenes with everything chopped up and things were great. And then I could go and repeat stuff. And it's like, well, let's just change the tempo of the whole song. And I'd say, all right, well, hold on a second. I'd select everything, go change the tempo. It took a little bit of work. Wasn't the end of the world. But again, what I was talking about earlier is I get into that situation where I'm in the moment, and I want to have this flexibility. I want to have the freedom to repeat. I want to have the freedom to jump around during the song, but I can't spend hours doing it. So for instance, like I mentioned earlier, we had kids. My job got busier. I didn't have the time to do all this work I was doing formatting. So I ended up switching. I was very hesitant to it at the time. Ended up switching from doing a master set in session view to building my set every week in arrangement view, unless I was in a situation where I needed access to any song at any point. That's when I went back to a master set idea, but in arrangement view. So I've kind of switched about, how long ago would this have been? 8 years ago, maybe, just using arrangement view primarily when I'm on stage for tracks. Let me mention a couple things and I'll get into showing you why I'm a big fan of using arrangement view. Couple notes. Both views can be hacked to do almost anything. So I get in a conversation with people where I'll say things like, arrangement view is fantastic for creating really great transitions, kind of hands-off transitions. And they'll say, well, you can create transitions in session view, moving the stop. And it's like, yes, I understand I can remove stop buttons, but call me in 2 weeks when you remove a stop button and things accidentally keep playing. It's going to be a disaster. Or I'll say, arrangement view is great because I can change the tempo. And they say, well, it's, in session view, you can automate the tempo using the IEC driver. I found this video this guy did, and it's really, really cool. Or people will say, hey, in arrangement view, I want to hack it so that, I can basically have this song playing and that song playing and this kind of overlap thing. And I'm like, well, that's what session view does inherently. I had a guy reach out one time that wanted to just basically create a set where he had a looping section, and then when he was ready to go on, he goes to this looping section. Then he's ready to go on, he goes to this looping section. He said, I want to do an arrangement view. And I said, no, let's do it in session view. That's what it's made for. So I'm going to stress both views can be hacked to do almost anything. Each view, though, is better at the other view than at certain things, right? It's just inherently the way it's made. So session view is very non-linear. It's meant for non-linear content. It's meant for kind of looping things. It's meant for drum loops that loop over and over. One of the powerful things about session view, this is why I love it as a songwriting tool. This is why I love it as a keyboard player when I'm playing keys live on stage. I'm using session view, is because it gives me these clips, and I can fire these clips in any track independent of each other, and then I can combine them into scenes, which is really, really powerful. So if you're doing a very non-linear performance, in the sense of you step on stage with your band and you say, we're going to play these 4 chords over and over, and we're going to loop them endlessly. And then when we're ready to move on, we're going to go to this next set of 4 chords, and we're going to go to this next set of 4 chords. We have no idea when. We're just going to keep looping that. If you're doing a more loop-based performance, session view is the way to go. But the other side of this is arrangement view is very linear, right? If we take a look at what I showed you earlier, this is a very linear thing. It's laid out in a very linear fashion. It looks like, who was it earlier? I was talking to, I think Chris, I can't remember, I'm trying to get my mouse over there so I could see your name. Sorry, Chase. There we go. If I'm talking to Chase, who has been using Pro Tools, Chase is familiar with this, right? It's a linear view. It looks a lot like Logic. It looks a lot like Pro Tools because it's linear. It's a great place when you're running tracks because what inherently is a song? A song is a linear thing. So if you step on stage with any sense of arrangement, and you're using tracks, I would encourage you to use arrangement view. And I'll show you some of the reasons, some of the benefits why. But primarily for me, it's because song is a linear thing. Arrangement view is meant to be linear. So instead of hacking session view to go to the next song automatically at the end of it, or create this transition, or do these kind of weird, quirky things I would do, or just get stuck with this one sing, and then my other option is to chop all my songs up. That's when I switch to arrangement view so that I can load and build a set in 5 minutes with 5 to 6 songs, have all the freedom and flexibility I need in it, all in arrangement view. So let me show you a couple of my favorite reasons for using arrangement view. Someone made a comment here. Any tips on how to control tracks while doing spontaneous worship? Yes. Watch this webinar and we're going to continue to go through tips. So great question. We're starting to get into a lot of that stuff, but again, make sure your tracks are warped. Make sure you're using arrangement view, and I'll share the other two here in a moment. So over back into arrangement view, let's look at this. Big reason I love arrangement view. Again, I can press play on my tracks, right? And let's jump to this B section. I'm going to click this, right? I jump right to the B section. If I want to jump ahead to the A section here, I could do that. And notice it's all happening in time with the click. It's staying in time. It doesn't sound, I mean, it sounds a little weird because of the fact that because of the fact there's a cymbal swell, kind of sidechain white noise thing going in, and I'm jumping around. But I have the ability just to go, let's repeat this, and I can jump back and repeat that. Now, you're not seeing what I'm doing, but I'm clicking with my mouse on my laptop. That's not a great way to do it, but I can also use my MIDI controller. And we're going to talk about the 4 MIDI mappings you should have in your controller in just a moment. But what I can do is, as this is playing, right? Let's just decide I have a measured global quantization, which let's show you is up here. It says 1 bar. I leave mine set to 1 bar at all times. Global quantization means whenever you trigger something, you have 1 measure before that thing happens. So on the next downbeat of 1, that thing is going to happen. So let's press play. Okay. It's going to build in. Let's just skip this bass section here and let's go straight to the B section. Okay. Now with just a couple presses on the MIDI controller, I jumped right ahead. Now if I want to repeat this, and we'll break down how I'm doing this in just a second, I'm just going to press this 1 button here, right? And I'm going to wait until musically it makes sense. So halfway through this section, right? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. It doesn't have to be perfect on time because Ableton makes that transition for me. And then again, I can press stop to stop that. So I like using arrangement view, and arrangement view gives you a lot of flexibility, a lot of ability to flow because of just the fact it's linear, because of global quantization. I can jump around and use locators without having to chop my song up and think, how many measures is this? It's there inherently. So the thing that kind of makes this happen, and this transitions us into our next section, which is the 4 MIDI mappings that you need for live performance, is, again, we talked about global quantization. Leave this set to 1 bar up here. We have our locators up here that are going to allow us to flow. But we have these 2 buttons here. And most people don't know about this immediately in arrangement view, but this is our previous locator and our next locator button. So with audio stopped, watch what I can do. I can click next locator. See how I'm just hopping through those? You'll see it's kind of hard to see this way. It's like a little triangle that's pointed down. And as I just navigate through these, I'm just jumping through my song a locator at a time, a marker at a time, right? So I can go to the B section, then I can go up here and click play, and my song starts right on the B section, which is great. But as my song is playing, I can use those same buttons, I'm just using my mouse now, to click it to jump back to the previous locator. So this is essentially, think of this as, like, this is my repeat, right? Now I'm gonna click it, so watch, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, we're right there, right? So that's essentially functioning as my 1 button repeat, okay? So In arrangement view, the thing that's going to unlock this ability to flow, for those of you that are worship leaders, it's a question I get all the time. I've had it twice during the webinar. How can we be spontaneous? How can we flow in the moment? Well, I already showed you how you can take a song that's pre-recorded to a tempo or a specific key and change that to be any tempo, any key. Again, I would encourage you, don't do that as the song is playing. You could, I mean, it wasn't bad, but you can just start a song, have your guitar player, worship leader play, tap your tempo out 4 times, and suddenly your song is going to play at whatever tempo you are at. Again, it's about playing with tracks, not playing to tracks. So key number 1 is warping. Key number 2 is using arrangement view, because we have locators. We have that previous and next locator button that's really going to help. So now let's talk about those 4 MIDI mappings. So going and using arrangement view and the way that I was and jumping around is really great. It's really, really helpful, but you don't want to look like you're checking your email on stage. And so that's where I always encourage people to use a MIDI controller. Let me know in the comments what MIDI controller you are using live. If you're using tracks, using a MIDI controller, maybe you're a guitar player and you have a foot switch. The Disaster Area Designs DM60 is my personal favorite. That's what I normally use for webinars, but I decided I would change it up and use the Atom. If you're a keys player, what MIDI controller are you using? Drummers, what MIDI controller are you using? Let me know in the comments what MIDI controller you are using. And while you're doing that, I'm going to share a couple links here. And then we're going to talk about the 4 MIDI mappings that you need to use for live performance. Marcelo's using the APC40 MK2. That one is a great one. I have not used the MK2. I've used it. I don't have one though, but I did have the original APC40, which was really great. So what I'm sharing, a couple links in the comments here, is you guys let me know what MIDI controller you are using live. These are links to, the first 2 are 2 tutorials where I show you how to set up your MIDI controller with Ableton Live. Again, completely free. Second thing is showing you how to make those 4 MIDI mappings for live performance. Joseph says, really sophisticated MIDI controller setup, the good old laptop keyboard. Yeah, that's the best way to get started because it's built in. You use the best MIDI controller available, which is your finger, to trigger things. It's really, really great. Adding a MIDI controller gives you some added flexibility, which we will look at. So let's take a look over here. Not at my notes, in fact, but at Ableton Live. And let's talk about using our MIDI controller, and I'll show you again those 4 MIDI mappings that you should make. So the 4 mappings that I would encourage you to use for your MIDI controller. Again, there's so many options, right? So Marcelo has the APC40 MK2 grid-based controller. You plug it in similar to the Ableton Push Novation Launchpad. Plug it in, you get your little grid thing, you get some cool pre-map stuff. The thing I love about using MIDI controllers in Ableton Live, and you'll see this in those tutorial videos I posted, is I like making my own MIDI mappings, right? And I map 4 things. You can do lots of stuff, and we'll talk about some added additions. We already talked about tap tempo. I gave that away slightly, but we're going to talk about the 4 things, 4 mappings you should make. And those 4 mappings are play, stop, previous locator, and next locator. If you have those 4 mappings, that's going to give you tons of flexibility to navigate your set live in the moment, in rehearsal. This is a key thing for me. This is another reason why I started using arrangement views. Get in the middle of rehearsal, we'd stop halfway through the song because the bass player, it's always the bass player. Sorry, Mark, or those of you out there, the bass players. The bass player misses a note and we've got to start all the way either from the beginning again because we're using tracks, or we go, let's just finish the song without tracks. Then you never get to finish the song with tracks. And at that point, you're not playing with tracks, you're playing 2 tracks and you just decided to mute them. They're not very important. Why do you use them in the first place at that point? When I'm in arrangement view though, we could get in the middle of the song, right? So in this scenario, we could be in the middle of rehearsal. We can play and then we go, oh, yep. All right. So we missed it. Everyone good. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a measure of click and then we're going to start back on that section. So let's hit stop, 2, 3, 4, boom, right back in that section, right? Always give my band a measure of click and then we get right into whatever section we stopped at. That was what, 3 seconds as opposed to, oh, let me find it, scroll ahead. Nope. Okay, here we go. All right. If you've been in rehearsal and done that before, you know how awful that is. This is a big reason for me. I'm in arrangement view. I'm using locators and using those previous next locator buttons in a really powerful way. There's another really cool hack where if you know Ableton well enough, you'll be able to track on this. I don't do this anymore, but you could create a MIDI track. You can arm it, or an audio track. You can arm it as if you're recording it. You can turn on count in on your click. And then whenever you trigger a section, press play, it's going to give you a 4-measure count in and then go. That's a quick hack. I'm not going to explain it. If you know Ableton, you'll get that. But let's walk through those mappings. Joseph, it's play, stop, previous locator, next locator. Check out that tutorial I posted earlier for a little kind of deeper dive into those. But we're going to walk through them here real quick. So over in arrangement view, let's set this up. So to MIDI map, super simple in Ableton Live, Command M, we talked about this earlier, Control M if you're on a PC, and I want to map play, stop, previous locator, next locator. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and delete these. I could delete them all in bulk by using my MIDI mappings browser over here, but what's the fun in that? So to map in Ableton Live, super straightforward. I'm gonna click on my play button. I'm gonna go over to my Atom, and I'm gonna make this play. Right, I'm going to click that. Now, this controller obviously has a actual dedicated play button. I don't like using buttons typically for that. I just use pads because it's big, I'm stupid, and it's easy to hit, right? Stop is going to be this guy, okay? And then we're going to do previous locator, which we're going to go here, okay? And then we're going to do next locator. And you can notice all I'm doing is just clicking on that, and I'm pressing this guy, pressing the button that I want to assign to. Let me show you one other thing. Again, we're not going to go in depth here because we only have about 15 minutes left in the webinar. But one thing I will show you really quick, if you're using a MIDI controller in the way I like to use a MIDI controller, which means that you are plugging your MIDI controller in and you are mapping specific things to specific features in Live, as opposed to using the default control surface mapping. So for instance, Marcelo, using your APC 40, you selected everything's pre-mapped. I'm not a huge fan of that because I want to keep it simple and I want to just I want to map and make specific things dedicated to what I'm doing. And again, I'm only really using 4 things. Let me show you one thing though. And again, I dive into that in that lesson a little bit, in that tutorial a little bit. So make sure to check that out. But real quick, if I do Command comma, this takes me into Live's MIDI preferences. Here is the key. If you're going to use a MIDI controller, and I talk about this into the tutorial, how to set up your MIDI controller for live performance. Real quick version of this though. Go to MIDI tab here, again, Command comma, which is preferences. Go to the MIDI tab, watch the tutorial for a more in-depth thing. The most important thing here, if you're going to do what I'm doing, is go to the input for your controller. In this case, it's the Atom, and make sure that that remote is enabled. That's going to allow you to remotely control Ableton Live from that device. That means I'm going to remotely control Ableton Live from this device, from the Atom. And because I'm doing that, then again, I can walk over to the Atom and I can press play on it and it's going to play, right? So now, with those 4 MIDI mappings set up, here's what this allows me to do. Because I'm using arrangement view and because I'm doing have the 4 MIDI mappings, what I could do is press play, okay? And then I have this next locator button, which is going to skip ahead. I have a measure to do it, so however far I can get a measure, 3, 4, in section, right? Jump ahead. But then I can start to think of that previous locator button essentially as a repeat button, right? So let's repeat. So let's just press that. And again, as an MD, as a keyboard player, whatever position you're in, you just have your MIDI controller sitting there. And if the artist you're working with, the worship leader you're working with, the vocalist you're working with, and maybe it's an instrumentalist that you're playing with, whatever it is, whoever they are, if they turn around and say, repeat, let's repeat that section, you press 1 button and you repeat. And you hear how seamless that is. It didn't even sound like I repeated a section because I just hit repeat. Again, just press that button in the last measure of the section and it repeats, which is great. And then if I want to jump ahead, let's skip the lick for section A. Let's go straight to the B section, right? And I have that B section in there. Really super straightforward, really super simple. So let me talk about this really practically, and then Jordan has a great question I want to get to. Again, I'll mention you guys post questions and comments as we go. If you're watching live, post questions, comments as we go. I don't get distracted by them unless my mind's somewhere else. And I like interacting with you guys while we are live. So feel free to post as many of those as possible. And if you get annoyed, I'll just block you anyway or ignore you. So it doesn't matter. A couple things real quick here. So let's talk about this for, who was that earlier? So a couple people asked about, B Studio Multimedia Company asked about the idea of doing this from a church perspective, spontaneous worship perspective. How do you manage this? How do you do it? Again, for me, it comes down to, I'm just thinking, do I repeat or do I go to the next section, right? So very practically, if I look at this in Ableton Live, I press play. Let's jump ahead to this section. Right, I press play. And if we pretend, don't be freaked out by the fact that this is a electronic instrumental song. Pretend it's a worship song, pretend it's a song that has vocals. But we just get in the moment and someone says, let's sing it again. All I think is I'm just going to hit this repeat button anywhere in that last measure, right? It doesn't have to be right on time, anywhere in that last measure. And we're going to repeat that section. Or we say, let's jump ahead to the B section. I just hit that however many times I need in that last section, and we're suddenly jumping ahead, right? Now, all that is possible when your tracks are warped, 1, 2, when you're using arrangement view, and 3, when you're making use of those 4 MIDI mappings: play, stop, previous locator, next locator. Now, additionally to that, there's a couple other buttons we can map. We talked about mapping tap tempo earlier. I don't know if I showed you guys how to do that, so let's take you back over here. Command M, you go up to tap, right? I'm going to delete this. You go up to the upper left-hand corner, click tap, press this guy, right? And it's assigned to tap tempo. The way tap tempo works, as you saw earlier, tap 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Or if you're in 6/8, well, don't do it in 6/8, use 6/4, but then when you tap in 6/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then your tempo set 3 if you're in 3/4, so on and so forth. But when you do that, then that's going to change your tempo automatically, which is really cool. The other thing you could do is set like a solo click button. So for the question about doing things spontaneously, you're probably at times going to need to kill the track. You could use a solo click button. You just click on, in this case, I'm clicking on the click track, which this will be a perfect time to Jordan's question here in a moment. Clicking on the solo for the click track so that I can solo that. So if for some reason we're in the track and I want to kill all the tracks but keep the click going, I could do that, and then I could still jump around to the section I want, to go, oh, I missed it. Actually, let's get back. And then when I'm ready to get out of it, I can bring the clip back in. There's a way using the IAC driver, which we talked about in the course, to create a MIDI clip that smoothly fades your tracks out, right? And then when you're ready, you click the same button and it smoothly fades your tracks back in. That's in the course as a part of the using the IAC driver lesson or course there, which is cool. But we could do tap tempo, we could solo click. You could also do something where you could solo or mute rather the guide cue so that you have the flexibility to jump around without the guide cue. But as Joseph mentions, and I'm getting behind on questions, so I'll shut up here so I can get to some questions. Joseph mentions, how does this work when using vocal cues? I can imagine vocal cues playing 1 bar prior to each section, which you're correct, which is a problem when jumping to different sections than what you just cued, which is right. So when I'm repeating sections, I have a really simple solution for that. When I am jumping to a new section, there's not a real easy way to do it in arrangement view unless you do a lot of work. If that's a really big need for you, then you can do it in session view, and you can set the clip for the guide cue to be, instead of the quantization being 1 bar or being global, you can set it to be none. So when you trigger that scene to select it, the guide cue fires immediately. I think, though, the easiest way to do this, because let me say this way. If your band is solely dependent on band cues, and the situation where if they need to hear the girl on the track say verse in order to do the verse, then you're probably going to be a little locked in, and your band probably shouldn't be jumping around this much anyway, right? You need a band that's kind of comfortable with flexing. But in the case of fully jumping around your arrangement, what I would just do is create a flow button of some sort. And again, we're going past our 4, but that's okay. Customize this to what works for you. But let's say we've got our guide track, and stand by, Joseph and everyone else that wants to dig into this. We're going to talk about our 4th thing here in a moment, which is going to unlock some really cool possibilities as well too. But let's call this our guide cue. All right. So here's our guide. And let's say that when I want to have a flow moment or somewhere where I'm just jumping around the song, I'm going to assign a button to turn off my guide cue. So I could turn off my guide cue, then I'm just going to tell the band in their ears, stay on this until I tell us to get out of it, or we're going to jump to the bridge or whatever. And then I would just select, let's say we're playing. I would turn off, let's turn on our guide. That's how it would normally function. If you look up here, it's going to be on my face. If you look up here, it's on. I would kill the guide and say, hey, we're just going to repeat this. Watch me. I'll count us back in. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're back in, and then I can turn the guide back in, right? So that's a little more hands-on, but that's one way you can do it. Now, again, hang on for just a moment, Joseph and everyone else, as we get to the 4th thing. that we're talking about today, which is going to unlock some really cool possibilities on how to do some really neat stuff. So Jordan had a great question. Hey, Will, great stuff so far. Thank you, Jordan. Is there a reason why you use a separate click track in the tracks than just using the main click in Ableton and then just route it to your interface from there? Yeah, really good question. So if you like the Ableton click sound, that's great. If you don't need subdivisions, that's great. Just stick to the Ableton click sound. But the reason that I use a MIDI click, and I talk about this in one of our tracks, our main track course right now, which is currently being split into multiple courses on the site, but I kind of go deep. I apologize for everyone that's seen this. I kind of go deep for about 6 or 7 minutes on why I use a click that's not the Ableton click, that's not the click that's included with the file, but the reason why I use a MIDI click and why I don't use, again, Ableton's click or the click that's included in my files. 2 reasons primarily. One, I want a consistent click sound across all my songs, which you could get with Ableton's click if you warp stuff, but I want a consistent click sound across all my songs, and then I want subdivision. So with my click, the way this is set up, let's see, there we go, there's my solo for click. I can bring up my 8th notes if I want them. I can bring down 8th notes if I want them. I also can change click sounds if I want them to a different type of click, and that carries over across all my songs. Now this is really important to me when you're in a situation where you're at a church, or I've worked with some like cover bands that, not just a single cover band, but like a organization that has multiple cover bands. They're formatting their Ableton content one time for everyone to use, but different bands like different click sounds. If you do it for audio, you take that one song you formatted one time, you're now formatting 4 different times for 4 different bands for click sound. If I use a MIDI click, one, I can subdivide so that this song that's at 65, I can have 8s. This song that's at 120, I can just have quarters. And then in the moment, just like a Boss Doctor beat, I think that's the name of the metronome that we used to use, just like an old school metronome, I can adjust the subdivisions, which is key. I can change the click sound as well. So that's great. Let's see, 1 second here. Okay, Chris, what's the best way to change keys if you're using a MIDI foot controller expression pedal? You could do that, Chris. Again, that is a very much like in the moment thing. Your band has to be able to really, really nail that. What I would probably do, honestly, and we won't get into this in this webinar, in your situation, I would probably just have a MIDI controller like this next to me that I could move a knob. You could use an expression pedal, but I imagine you're going to have a lot of play and it's going to be difficult to get it just right. You may want to have just a controller like this and use MIDI clips and map it to, to then pull up that specific key based on where you have it. That happens so rarely for me that it's not something I do all the time, but it's there if you need it. And also, Chris, if you're in a situation where you're doing a lot of that, probably would be great to have someone that has a laptop next to them, so in those moments they could bail from the MIDI controller if need be and just reach over. So that's, in that situation, if you are, let's say in a worship situation, you're doing a lot of spontaneous stuff like that, you probably don't want to have the drummer doing it. Sorry, David. Sorry, Joe. You probably want to have a keys player doing it, or even better yet, a guitar player doing it, so that they can, not play their shimmery leads for a second and reach over and do that. Great questions. Let me take one more from Seth. Hey, Seth. I think we've chatted before, and then we'll move on. What's your method for this if you build a session with multiple songs? When you import other sessions live, you can't import locators, but don't want to manually add all the locators back for each song. Yeah. One of the biggest frustrations for me with Ableton is that locators do not come with the songs. 2 things. 1, I have Ableton add them automatically for me. And 2, I don't name them. I use what's called a markers track that has my name. And then Ableton just adds my locators in automatically for me so that I don't have to do it. And then I just leave them unnamed and use that, which is great. In order to learn how to do that, you got to check out the site. I think I've done some videos before on that, but that's one way to do it. Jared, I've been using OnSong for iOS for spontaneous, which will use session view and click a section of my song on my iPad to go to the section I want. I also have follow actions to go through the song. My entire library of songs is in one set. Yeah. So Jared, that's what I used to do in session view. That's what I encourage people to do in arrangement view when they need that freedom and flexibility to jump around. Or not jump around, but the freedom and flexibility to do any song at any point. That's a great way to do that. OnSong is a great way if you want to hit that, and if that works for you, that's fantastic. I'm a big fan of, again, I'm not very smart, so I'm a big fan of give me a big fat repeat button When I use my DMC 6D foot controller, I just have one button that's dedicated to repeat. So whatever section I'm on, I can repeat, which works really, really well. All right, great. So let's move on. So in a second, I want to talk about how to deal with, who was that? I think Joseph earlier brought this up. I want to talk about how to deal with guide cues, how to work with guide cues when you're using Ableton Live and doing this in a way that is, you kind of need guide cues to let your band know where you're going to next. I want to talk about that. I also want to show you how to, what I call, create a flow moment where at the end of the song, your click can continue going and you can jump anywhere in your song. And then I'm going to tell you the fourth thing that I want you to start applying in order to flow with tracks. And again, the goal of this is simplicity and not spending hours and hours doing this. You could do whatever the heck you want to. If you walk away from this webinar and you're like, man, I've got a system that works really well for me, fantastic. Stick with your system. My goal, honestly, I've gotten too old in my life to try to argue with people. If you got something that works for you, fantastic. Use your system. That's great. But if you're looking for a way to spend less time, have more flexibility and simplicity in doing stuff, we're going to apply. We talked about one. What was the first thing? I already forgot. Man, I'm talking about getting old. I'm losing my mind. Warping your stems. 2, using arrangement view. 3, making those 4 MIDI mappings. Again, we can add to it. Play, stop, previous, next locator. But I'm going to share the fourth thing that I want you to do in order to have freedom and flexibility in just a moment. But before I do that, again, I want to say thanks to my friends at Presonus who have sponsored this webinar. If you're watching this for free, if you're not a subscriber, you're watching this webinar for free, send Presonus a tweet, Instagram message, and say thank you. So they've paid the way for this webinar to be free. They just released an update to their Studio Live software. Chase was mentioned earlier. He's a big Studio One fan. I like Studio One as well too. I know a lot of friends that are switching from Pro Tools for producing, for recording, to Studio One. They released a great update for Studio One, I believe this week. If you guys are fans, let me know in the comments of Studio One. But I believe they released it just this week. And it's a fantastic software for recording, for producing. But they also make really, really cool hardware. So they have incredible interfaces. They have their Studio Live mixers, which are great. They have a really cool ecosystem. I remember this was 3 or 4 years ago, being at NAMM, when they started to release kind of the like rack mount versions of their Studio Live stuff. And then they started releasing moving fader controllers for Studio Live. And I started to think, okay, I think they're getting it. They're moving to this ecosystem model of you put your snake kind of at front of house, or excuse me, on stage. Then you have your console back at front of house. You just connect via an Ethernet cable, and then you can plug directly into this computer from your console and track. They got this ecosystem thing going that's really, really cool. But one of the things that they also have that I'm a really big fan of is they have some really cool MIDI controllers. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been using for about the past month the Atom MIDI controller from Presonus. So let's move this so you guys could see this fairly well. This is a really, really cool controller. Now, a lot of people, if you find reviews on this, what's everyone going to be talking about? They're going to be talking about using this in the studio to make beats, to make drum loops. There's a cool mode. Let's see if I can change it, where you can even play piano parts right on it. So these kind of represent your different notes. So you could play a piano part. In order to change this, hit setup, and I'm going to press 1 to go back to drum loop mode or pad mode. There's also a fun Mardi Gras mode which makes your pads go crazy. It doesn't look as great on my cheap Logitech webcam, but there you go. So that's kind of fun as well. But there's some really cool stuff that this controller can do. Obviously, most people are talking about this, which makes sense from the perspective of one, using this with Studio One, because the integration with Studio One is rock solid. It's fantastic. If you're looking for a controller for Studio One, there's nothing better than the Atom. 2, though, they talk about it for playing loops, right, in the studio, for producing music. It's a fantastic solution for that. But I want to let those people talk about that from that perspective. I'm a awful finger drummer. You don't want to see me try to play drum stuff. I remember when I did an event for Ableton, and I was trying to show how to use the Ableton push and demo. It just was not good. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to show my finger drumming abilities or lack thereof. I need to go through a few more melodics lessons in order to get that and make sure I have it. But this is a fantastic controller for live performance as well. Now, there's two things and two scenarios where I think it works really, really well. One is for keys players. Let me know, is anyone a keys player out there? Throw your hand up if you know the emoji for that, or just say, yep, keys player. I think this is a fantastic solution as a keys player. I typically and often talk about using microcontrollers as a keys player, like something with faders, with pads that you can throw up on your keyboard, not throw up on your keyboard, put on your keyboard, that you can use and control Ableton with, or MainStage, or whatever you're using. Hopefully you're not using MainStage, but you can control whatever software you're using. I think the Atom is a great solution for keys players, especially that are using Ableton, for two reasons. One, you get tons of great pads, and I want to show you one of my favorite bits about the pads in a moment. So when I use keys stuff in Ableton Live, I'm running in session view, and I have clips that call up presets or chains, chains in my instrument rack that are essentially functioning as presets. So I like to kind of have it to where I can go and combine different chain selectors across different types of sounds to essentially have presets. So I make those into scenes. I talk about that in our keys course, as well as our keys template that's available on the site. And the Atom is fantastic for that with the pads, right? I can visually kind of see everything. I can trigger stuff as I want to, as I need to, which is great. But I also just love the endless encoders up here. So what's great about this is you get away from that awkwardness of having a fader. One, you typically have a fader that's like this tall on these microcontrollers, and we act as if that's really usable and functional for us to create a smooth fade. Well, with an endless encoder like this, it doesn't matter where it is. It's going to catch with Ableton. I use value scaling for my MIDI controllers. Again, check out the setting up your MIDI controller for live performance video to go deeper into that. But endless encoders are fantastic because I just have tons of range as opposed to this small little fader. So I'm a big fan of the Atom for that. Now, when it comes to a controller for tracks, though, I think the Atom is a fantastic controller because you look at this and you go, great, 16 pads. This is fantastic. But you might be going, man, I have way more than 16 songs in my set. You know, what do I do for this? Well, there's a really cool option on here. Let's see if you can see. If I press bank, this button right here, you're going to see just the bottom half of these pads light up. And what I essentially get is I get 8 banks of 16 each. Now, if I did my math correct, that's 128 pads. And if it's not, someone correct me. I'm a musician. I'm not a mathematician. I can count to 4 and I can play 4 chords. That's all I need. But what's cool, when you press bank, you can do that, and then you can press a bank and you see the colors change. Again, kind of hard to see, but the colors change to match what you're doing. So let's see if I can do this to show you guys. So there are my different options. Let's select this purple here, right? Or pink. And I could do that. Let's go. Sorry, just do this in reverse. I think that's red, right? And I have that. So what I do is I have these different banks, and each one of these banks has 16 discrete MIDI notes that it's sending. So when I press this note in this bank, it's not the same note as this note here. Because when I press that, that starts and stops Ableton, right? Which is really cool. So for those of you, a couple of people earlier mentioned you're doing a master set in Ableton. This would be a great controller for you because you could have every single song assigned to that. And then on your set list, if you don't move your songs together, it's a big reason I like using arrangement view, either to put my songs next to each other, to be hands-free transitions. I can essentially press play on my set at the beginning, go all the way through and never have to touch my computer. It's going to select the next song. It's going to pause when I need it to pause, press play. It's going to go all sorts of fun things. But if you're in a situation where you need access to any song at any point, then this is a great controller for you, because you could, on your set list, or have a document of songs or whatever you want to do, and say, okay, we're going to go to this song. This song is purple 7, so I'm going to hit purple 7, and that's, which you can't see, but I'm on purple and I hit 7. That's going to then pull up that song and it's ready to go. So I think the Atom is a fantastic controller. You guys could check it out. Head to Presonus.com, head to Sweetwater.com to purchase it. If you have any questions, send me a message on Instagram, on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter much anymore, but Instagram, Facebook, leave a comment in the comments to let me know. But this is a fantastic controller. So I think if you're looking for a great controller for live performance, check out the Atom. from Presonus. So, and again, thanks so much to Presonus for sponsoring this webinar. Again, if you follow them on any of the socials, just send them a message and say, hey, thanks for sponsoring the webinar. Or maybe say, that guy talks way too long, stop sponsoring his webinars. But if you like it, say thanks to Presonus. Thank you to Presonus for sponsoring this. This has been a lot of fun. So Atom pad controller, fantastic controller for live performance. Now we've talked about 3 of the 4 things that are going to help you flow and have freedom of tracks. Again, 1, warp your tracks. 2, use arrangement view. 3, make those 4 MIDI mappings: play, stop, previous locator, next locator. Now 4th and finally, the thing that is going to help you have, freedom and flexibility in using tracks is using the IAC driver. Now we talked about this earlier. Someone brought up this particular issue. Let me know in the comments, are you using guide cues in your set? So I imagine a lot of you worship folks are using guide cues just because the fact they come in your file helps your band kind of know where to go. I'm not a huge, personally, I'm not a huge fan of guide cues, but I'm a fan of using them when you have a lot of automation going on. I was talking with, who was this? Someone not too long ago, where we started talking about building these files that control lights, lyrics, videos, and we kind of talked about it. At that point, you really should be using guide cues if you weren't, because like you got to stick to the stuff that's there, right? You got to stick to what's recorded there, and that's really going to help. Yeah, Joseph said they're a double-edged sword, which I agree. Yeah, Joseph, what's wrong with Main Stage? We don't have enough time, and there's not enough hours in the day for me to rant long enough about Main Stage. Joe says, yes, he's using guide cues as well too. So let's talk about a couple different things we can do with guide cues. Dave's using guide cues and MD at the same time. Yeah, Dave, I think that's the way to do it. Like, guide cues are a great resource. Use them, but you got to train MDs to run tracks, especially in a church situation. You got to have people that are great MDs that can do this. That could also be the worship leader. That could be the singer out front that's doing it. But you got to have someone that kind of knows Ableton and is treating this as an instrument. So let's talk about this guide cue issue. So for those of you that are new to this, or you're not familiar with guide cues, let's talk through what that is and particularly how to do it. Now, I can't remember how I mapped this song, so give me a second. There we go. Okay, got it mapped. So I'm just going to press play on this song for a moment. I want you to listen to the guide cues so you have an idea of what's happening. Now, as I often do, slightly jokingly, if you're an attorney for Bethel Music or multitracks.com, this is purely for educational purposes. Please do not take down my video. So here we go. Let's listen to this for a second.
Instrumental.
Okay, you heard that guide cue that said instrumental. Listen to where we say verse here in just a second.
Verse.
Okay, great. So we get that. Guide cue, the basic idea is it typically happens the last measure of the section we're in, and it's going to tell us the next section that we are going to, right? I think we all get that. Hopefully that makes sense to us. So here's what typically happens. If I'm doing instrumental and I want to repeat instrumental, remember previously we talked about using our previous locator and next locator buttons right here, right? Previous locator, next locator. If I'm using those with guide cues, this is what happens. Let's play instrumental. Okay, I'm going to click
Verse
to go back to the instrumental, right? And you see it repeated the instrumental, but what did the guide cue say? It said verse. So this is the issue Joseph presented to us earlier. How do we work around that? So one solution that I mentioned earlier, again, it's just make that MIDI mapping, which I'm not going to remap because I already have this mapped in order to do what I'm about to show you. But make the MIDI mapping to where you can basically disable guide cues so that you get to this moment, you disable your guide cue, you say, repeat the instrumental, right? You say that on the mic, you're good to go, which is great. But let me show you how I've done this now. So let's be in the instrumental. I'm going to press this button to repeat. I already pressed it. 1, it's not in the last measure. And then 2, listen for, well, it should have been instrumental. Oh, there wasn't one. Standby. Now, listen to this.
chorus.
Oh, wrong guide cue. Let me find an instrumental guide cue here. I don't know why that's the wrong one. Let's listen.
Chorus.
Huh, I don't know why I don't have an instrumental guide cue. I must have deleted it. Well, let's pretend that the guide cue, that's a bad example. Let's do chorus. All right, here we go. So let's repeat our chorus here. So set
Chorus.
the beat, and we hear chorus, and it jumps back to our chorus, okay? Now, let's stop this for a moment. Let me take that off so that we're no longer repeating. Let's just play it normally. So here's it normally.
Chorus.
Chorus. And then we go into the chorus, right? Now, if I enable this,
Verse.
you hear it says verse, and then it jumps back to that verse, right? Or in this case, if I do chorus,
Chorus.
it's going to say chorus, and then it's going to go on, right? Now, if I disable it, then it should say instrumental. I can grab that guide key there.
Instrumental.
There we go. And it goes on to instrumental. So now for the sake of fixing this for later, I'm going to go ahead and grab this instrumental guide cue. So let me show you what I'm doing. Two things are kind of happening here. One, let's talk about how I'm repeating and not like stuck to the one measure phrase. So if I go here, let's just do instrumental. If I go to instrumental and I start playing here, I want you to look, so we have 3 tracks here: guide, dynamic guide, repeat. So you'll notice dynamic guide and repeat are off by now, by default. What I've done is I've MIDI mapped all 3, guide, dynamic guide, and repeat, to the same thing. So I just took one button on my MIDI controller, called it repeat, and I've MIDI mapped all 3 of those to the same thing. So if I toggle it, you're going to see it toggle from guide. When guide is on, dynamic guide and repeat are off. And when I hit essentially repeat, then dynamic guide turns on and my repeat track turns on. So this is what I call, and I talk about this in our Using the IAC Driver course. We talk about a couple different fundamental principles of using the IAC driver to make this happen. And you might be wondering, what's the IAC driver? Again, I'm skipping kind of pretty far down the line. Inter-application connectivity driver. It's built into every Mac. It's a way to send MIDI between programs on the same computer, or it's a way to send MIDI in the same program. So what I'm doing here is I'm essentially hacking Ableton Live so that I can send MIDI from a MIDI clip in Ableton Live back into Ableton to control certain things. So I'm going to pop a couple links here that you guys can save for later. Again, these links are all available in my notes that you'll be able to get once we are done. But let me throw these up before I forget. This was also a part of a free series that we did on the site on YouTube on Using the IAC driver. So completely free. Check those out. It'll show you how to set it up on Mac. Same thing you could do on PC. You just want to use is it Loop BE1? I think I have options on those pages for PC. Same exact process of setting it up and using it. If you're on a PC as opposed to a Mac, it's just a different thing that kind of at the core makes that happen. So we're talking about the IAC driver. Let me show you how I'm doing this. So what happens with this repeat track is essentially I've created a MIDI clip that is assigned up here to the previous locator. So I mapped this MIDI clip right here to be the same button that was on my MIDI controller. It's now mapped to previous locator. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this webinar, because I have a fantastic tutorial, in fact 4 tutorials on Using the IAC driver, where I show you how to create what I call a repeat track. All the repeat track is it's a MIDI track that contains MIDI clips that are assigned up to your previous locator button. And what gives you that ability to repeat anytime in the section as opposed to being tied to one bar is when I press this, I press repeat on my MIDI controller. Basically what's happening here is that repeat track, look right here, it turns on. What's going to happen is that MIDI clip right there is going to fire, which is going to trigger that previous locator button. Last measure,
Instrumental.
it's going to jump back to the instrumental. Okay? So that's the repeat track. That's that piece of it, which is really straightforward to do. And again, free tutorial in the comments there, in the live chat comments, so that you can follow along, or in the notes that you'll get tomorrow as long as you have registered. Okay, so that's the first piece of that, which is the repeat track. Second piece of this is what I call dynamic guide. Now, I completely stole this from multitracks.com playback app. So this is before I was working with Multitracks. I'm no longer working with Multitracks, but worked with them for about 4 years as director of training and development, and then eventually director of products. But before I was with Multitracks, they sent me the playback app that I was looking at, and they created this really cool feature called Dynamic Guide. They were able to do this because they own all the widgets, and they said do this and do that. Really great feature. If you've never checked it out, it's fantastic. But what Dynamic Guide basically let you do, excuse me, is repeat any song section anytime in the song section, right? So what I did, excuse me, goodness gracious, take a drink of water here, is I sat down and I thought, as I often do, I spent countless hours and said, is there a way I can do this in Ableton? Is there a way I can recreate this? And kind of came up with this process, shared it with my buddy Christian, who I think he adapted it a bit for session view, and then other people ripped us off from there and have adapted it into their set, which is great. You should rip us off. But the dynamic guide thing is essentially this. So it's our guide track. I just create a new track. I call it dynamic guide. It's an audio track. And then what I do, you saw me kind of do this, whether you realize it or not, for the instrumental. I don't know why that cue wasn't there initially, but I essentially kind of tweaked this. So what I did is the way the guide cue works. Let's switch back to the other one. If I listen to this.
Instrumental.
Okay, so a measure before the instrumental, I'm going to hear that cue. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing this, and then here's a quick shortcut. This is a big time saver for me. This shortcut is I'm going to, while I have this selected, hold Alt Option, and that's going to duplicate just that segment of the clip. Then I'm going to drop it, the last measure of that section, in the dynamic guide track. So essentially what's happening here is now when I go to the last measure instrumental, we hear instrumental. What that's doing is it's muting our guide and it's unmuting our dynamic guide. So again, just to see this in context, for the person who was asking about the spontaneous stuff earlier, this would be a perfect example. So we get into a song section, we're in the instrumental. Let's just press play. If everything goes as planned, I'm leaving it. But if we suddenly say, let's do it again, or the worship leader's praying, reading scripture, something that's going to be longer than that section, then I'm going to hit that button. I hit it at any time during that section. What
instrumental.
you're gonna hear is instrumental, and it's going to repeat back a measure. It's going to keep going and going until I'm ready to move on. And then when I'm ready to move on, I can hit that button, and you see it toggle back to guide, and it turns off dynamic guide and turns off repeat, which is really, really cool.
Verse.
And not too difficult to do. Again, with this process, I format my song, and I only format my songs one time. So I have what I call this 3-part framework for using tracks. That one of the pieces of this, the second piece of this, is formatting all your songs the same. So I'd spend about 5 to 10 minutes on a song the first time I get it to put it in this format, and then I just load it into my set, and it loads instantly. I do no work. I just load it right into my set, and it's there, which allows me to build a set of 5 or 6 songs in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and have all this flexibility, all this freedom built in, which is great. So super straightforward as far as that goes. So that's how to do a 1-button repeat. Again, we use our repeat track in order to do that. We're tied into, we can do that anytime in the measure that we want to repeat. 2, that's how to do what I, again, call our dynamic guide. Or that's me, again, ripping off multitracks.com playback app to use dynamic guide. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, final thing I want to show you here, using the IAC driver. And again, check out those tutorials to go a little deeper, how to set it up. Again, I know, like I mentioned, I apologize to Chase and people that are getting started with Ableton. I'm skipping pretty far down the line. But check out those tutorials as far as how to set up the IAC driver. Joseph says, this working using MIDI clips for guide cues? Yes, you just would have a second MIDI track and then use the MIDI clip from the previous section for your guide cue to make that happen, Joseph. So same exact process as audio. You would just use it for there. Will says dynamic guide is legit. Thanks for showing it to us. Yes, thanks, Will. That's one of my favorite things to show, as well as my having Ableton add my locators for me. All that's a part of the using the IAC driver course as well too. So let's dive in here. Last thing that I want to show you guys that's one of my favorite tricks of using the IAC driver. This is going to open up lots of possibilities for you all, is creating what I call a flow moment. This is typically, when I think of a flow moment, this is typically what I think of. So I've got my song here. I'm going to play just the outro for you. You're going to start to hear that really annoying noise kind of loop thing fade out. And actually, while this is happening, let me just refresh my memory, okay, of what my buttons are. There we go. So let's play this one more time. Okay, so you start to hear it fade out. We're good to go there. You see we've got a repeat track set up for that. I'm not going to choose to repeat that though, but when I get to this out section, what's going to happen is I'm hitting a separate track that's a flow track. All the flow track is it's same thing as a repeat track. I've just duplicated it here. I've got a MIDI clip that's assigned to previous locator, same exact thing. And it's just going to keep that click going over and over. So this is something I see and hear often in a worship setting, right? Or a setting where there needs to be spontaneity either in a section, but often at the end of the song. You keep the click going, you do the chorus, someone prays, someone reads scripture. If you're a cover band, if you're a band that's playing your own original music, this works for you too. This isn't just a worship thing or spontaneous worship concept thing. This works for you too. You get to the end of the song, you keep the click going. The band is kind of vamping and playing, the lead singer speaking, and then you want to go into another section of the song, previous section of the song. I'm going to stop that for a moment. I'm really good at talking over click. It annoys other people, but I've done it for so long, it doesn't bother me. But I'm going to stop it for just a second. What typically happens in this moment is people keep the click going, right? I'm going to start it up one more time. Let's jump ahead to there. They keep the click going. And then the band comes back in and they go back into a chorus and you're expecting this big wall of sound or whatever happened. Or maybe there's a synth lead. You get to the instrumental and every time they played it previously, there's this cool synth lead layered with the guitar lead. But when they go back into it, there's nothing there. Why is there nothing there? Well, it's typically because they use tracks. And this is the way I typically think of people, see people thinking of tracks, which is they're on rails, right? They're using tracks. They're stuck to this arrangement. But when they get to the end, they can have all the freedom they want. So they keep the click going. They go wherever they want to, but they don't bring tracks back in. If you want to do that, that's fantastic, but you don't have to do that. And the way you don't have to do that is by using this flow track trick and combining everything else we talked about, right? Or 4 things that we talked about earlier. So I have my click going. I have 2 options to get out of this. Now, if I stick to play, stop, previous locator, next locator, I can still just do 4 buttons here. And essentially what I have is I have one measure to decide what section do I want to jump back to. So we have our click going and then we decide, all right, let's go back to the A section, right? And then we jump to the A section, right? And you heard how smooth that transition is. I went from my click staying, I could play that progression. And then when we're ready to go back to the A section, we just jump to it. So let me jump back to the out. Let's keep the click just going for a moment. So I could do that. I could jump back to that section out of click. And again, all I'm thinking is I have that one measure and I'm thinking anytime in that one measure, however far I want to get back to, that's the section I can jump back to. But let's say we're in a scenario where you know at the end of the song, you're going to cycle through 2 different sections, your A section big, your B section big. Then what you can do is on your MIDI controller, make a direct one-to-one mapping to that section. So let me show you what I did is I went down here to, let's actually rename this. Instead of lick in, let's call it A section because that's what it is. It's the first time the main lick starts, but it's the A section. And what I did is I MIDI mapped this to 2 additional buttons on my MIDI controller. So this is A section, this is B section. And this is A section, this is B section. So these are big sections of the song. And I've done this so that I know I can get back to those portions of the song at any point. So let me jump back to our outro here and show you how this works. So our song ends, our content's fading out. We keep our click going. This gives the band an opportunity to play however long you want to, 3, 4, A section, right? And we're back in the A section. There's no stress. I just hit that button in the last measure and we're going. If I want to go to B section, let's jump. Let's get us back over there. Here's our outro, right? Let's go to B section, 3, 4, simple swell. We're right back in. And again, the beauty of that is we're back in, but then our tracks are there with us. It's not like we go back in and suddenly it sounds broken down. It sounds like an unplugged version of it. Again, if you want to do that and that's your desire, do it. But I want you to be intentional about it. Don't do it because you think you can't have the freedom. Do it because you want it to sound with like tracks are not there. If you want the tracks to be there, then do this so you can have the tracks there. So again, 2 ways to kind of make that happen. 1, use that previous next locator. You can see I'm just jumping all around my song using this guy. Again, great rehearsal tool as well. You could do that, or you can have those individual map sections A and B. I would suggest not doing a lot of individual sections. What I typically see people say is, hey, I want this one button to always be my verse, always be my chorus in every song. I'm not a huge fan of that because I'm not smart enough to know. And I guess you could make this decision and say, when I press verse, it's always going to be the big verse. But if you have a song where suddenly it's a song where verse 1 has different chords than verse 3, and the artist, the vocalist says they cue that they want to go to verse 3, but you have verse 2 map, it's just a lot to think about. So I don't do a lot of one-to-one mappings like that. I just get by with those 4 mappings: play, stop, previous locator, and next locator. Those are the primary mappings that I do that allow me to navigate my song and have the freedom and flexibility to do that. So again, if we wrap all this up, if we put a bow on all this, there's 4 things I want you to start doing to have freedom and flexibility with tracks. Again, if you're new to this, you're watching this completely from scratch, watch all the tutorials on our YouTube channel, watch the tutorials on our site, subscribe to the site, go through our essentials path, which is going to take you through navigating and understanding Live, where you learn every button that's in Live's interface, what it does in less than 10 minutes, right? We walk through warping, lots of other stuff. Basically what I'm saying is get some of that stuff down, then learn how to use tracks in Live, and then apply these 4 things. Again, warp your stems. Check out the tutorials I linked to before. Warp your stems, and in warping your stems, they're going to sync to your grid. You're going to be able to use a MIDI click. You're going to have the freedom to jump around in your song, change key, change tempo, even live in the moment. 2, start using arrangement views so that you have that freedom and flexibility with linear content without spending hours and hours doing it. Now, if this was a webinar just on tracks, if this was a course on the site, if this was our weekly or not weekly, monthly call that I do with subscribers that's actually happening this Friday, we could go deep on, why I use arrangement view to build a set, to be hands off, to press play and have it go, repeat any section, have transitions happen, have it pause and wait for me without having to do a lot of finicky kind of stuff, without any extra plugins, all completely stuff that's included in standard and free. We could do that. But 1, warp your stems. 2, use arrangement view. 3, use those 4 MIDI mappings for live performance: play, stop, previous locator, next locator. And then finally, learn to use the IAC driver. If you use the IAC driver, that's going to open up so many possibilities for you. Dynamic guide, repeat. You can have a MIDI clip that fades out your volume and fades it back in by triggering one thing. You can have Ableton add your locators for you. You can create a pause and go to next track. So at the end of song 1, it selects song 3, just waits for you to press play, and all you have to do is press play. Lots of really, really cool things when you are using the IAC driver. All right, a couple different questions here. And then final thing, we have a giveaway. We have a drawing for 1 year free subscription to From Studio Stage. And then 2, I'm going to share something special just for you guys that watched the webinar. So Joseph says, did you automate the fade out with a MIDI clip? I did not in this situation, but if I was going to do that, I would use the IAC driver to do that. And that's something we talk about in the using the IAC driver course. And Joseph asked, is there anything you did here a reference from other videos that necessitates Live 10 instead 9? Nothing I talked about today necessitates Live 10 instead of 9. Some of the videos I do, they are Live 10 specific things that I'll mention. We have a tutorial coming up this Friday, I believe, on showing how to create a fade across multiple clips. That's Live 10 only. Live 10 is a massive update to Live 9, and it's worth every penny. And they just released Live 10.1, which adds so many features to Live 10. Or to Ableton Live that makes it worth it. I will really quickly try to find this while I talk. But I posted a article for Sweetwater a couple months ago when the beta for Live 10.1 came out on some of my favorite features of Live 10.1. Let's see if I can find this here. 1 second. It's always impossible for me to find what I'm looking for. There we go. I will link this up so that you guys have this. And then I also have a couple videos here on the YouTube channel that show you some of my favorite features of 10.1. And then I have a course I released this the day the beta came out, so I was really proud of that, where I walk you through every new feature of 10.1, why it matters, and why it's useful. So crossfading multiple stems, yeah, so that's a fantastic reason to upgrade, Joseph. So if you guys have any other questions, comments, throw them in the comments here as we wrap up. 2 final things as we start to wrap up here. 1, let's do a giveaway. So I know everyone loves giveaways. I love giveaways. So what we did, the way this is working, just to let you know, is if you registered for this webinar, excuse me, before the webinar starts, then you are entered to win a free 1-year subscription to From Studio to Stage. And so what I've done is I've loaded all those names into a Google Sheet. I'm going to use this fantastic randomize feature to randomize the names, the order, and then whoever is the top name, you are going to win a free 1-year subscription to From Studio to Stage. So I'll say your name on the thing. I'm obviously not going to say your email, but I will send you an email after this, or maybe even first thing tomorrow. So if you don't get an email like immediately, don't freak out. I haven't forgotten about you, but I'll send you an email, ask you a few questions, and get you a account set up. Pause for dramatic effect. So let's randomize some names, and let's see who can win a free 1-year subscription to From Studio to Stage and all that entails. So let's randomize here. Let's jump up to the top. And our winner for free 1-year subscription to From Studio to Stage is Marcos Herrera. Marcos, congratulations. You have won free 1-year subscription to From Studio to Stage. Everyone, you can congratulate Marcos in the chat. The last time we did giveaways, everyone was like super kind about it, which was great. I don't know if that was because they were hoping that would help them win the other giveaways. But anyway, congrats to Marcos. I'm going to send you an email after this or first thing tomorrow, and send you a note to that. Yeah, look at all these nice folks. See, that's why I like this tribe. You guys are all really good people. Because you're really good people, because you are great folks and you're kind and generous, I want to give you something that I've never offered before. And so I've talked about this briefly. Hang with me for a moment here before you sign off. So I started a site about 8 months ago called From Studio to Stage. You can find it from studiostage.com. You got to this page by going through there, obviously, going through this page. But started From Studio to Stage about 8 months ago. Here's the premise of this. Here's all we talk about: performing on stage with Ableton Live. And the way we talk about that is it's not just courses. It's not, you see a lot of, here's the ultimate essential Ableton Live course where I've bundled all this knowledge together. I see this often, but there's nothing about live performance whatsoever. This is not one course. This is, I don't know, we are up to now in course count, but this is multiple courses, all about different features and functions of Ableton Live. So we talked about earlier using the IC driver with Ableton Live. We talk about controlling different things with Ableton Live, Luminaire, which is lighting, using the Play Audio 12 with Ableton Live. I do a really in-depth walkthrough of that, connecting the Play Audio 12 and the MIDI 4 Plus or MIO 4 with Ableton Live, how to control Ableton Live, how to route audio, getting started with Ableton Live 10.1, which again, this course is going to walk you through every brand new feature of Ableton Live 10.1 and show you how to use it. So if you want to get a jump start on 10.1, you should check that out, which is great. Warping, deep dive there, navigating and understanding live. Again, there's no faster, better way to get up and started with Ableton Live than going through this course. Tons of courses and content. We have 4 basic paths that you can follow. There's no essential order that you really need to go in, but if you want to learn how to use Ableton from a playback perspective, which is using Ableton for tracks, then check out our playback track and you'll learn that 3-part framework I talked about, how to manage files for live performance, how to use Ableton Live for tracks. If you're getting started with this and want to know how to do it, this is a almost 40 lesson course, 39 lessons that walk you through from A to Z on how to make this happen. So with From Studio Stage, we have courses. We have free tutorials that you can access. I post a tutorial every Friday for free. I post a podcast every Monday for free, which we just started. It's been going really, really well. We do monthly calls just for subscribers. Our call for this month is happening Friday. That's an opportunity to spend time with me and the rest of the community, just having me answer all your Ableton questions. This week, this month, we're talking through my favorite features of Live 10.1, answering any questions that people have. It's a great opportunity to get time with me answering your questions and not have to pay me a consulting fee to do that. So that's a lot of fun. So you get access to courses, that monthly call. Each week, you're going to get new content. I'm starting a couple new series that are going to be just for subscribers. I'm restarting our Sunday sound design series where I'm going to be showing how to create great sounds in Ableton Live. We do have a course already on the site in our keys path where I talk about creating keys in or creating great sounds in Ableton Live. But I'm going to be doing Sunday sound design stuff. I've also toyed with the ideas of some specific podcasts just for subscribers. So here's the deal. Typically, if you go to the site right now, start your free trial, you're going to get a 7-day free trial, right? Which is great. You get access to everything. You get access to every template, every course, every single piece of content on the site. You get access to the private Facebook group just for subscribers. That's one of my favorite parts of the subscription. You can ask anyone that's a subscriber. That's one of my favorite parts of the subscription because you get a chance to ask questions and hear from other people, not just me. So here's the deal. If you click that start your free 7-day trial button right now, you're going to start a free 7-day trial. But good things come to those who wait. If you wait till tomorrow morning, you are going to get an email in your inbox that's going to give you a free 30-day trial. I've never done that before. I don't know that I'll ever do it again. I was talking to a buddy of mine. He encouraged me to do it. But that is only for people that have subscribed to the site. And I'm only going to leave that link live for 1 day. I don't know, again, if I'm going to do that again or not. So check that out. Free 30-day trial. Hey, if you don't like it, you can cancel. No hard feelings. There's no, I'm not going to stalk you on Twitter and say you're a terrible person because you didn't decide to subscribe. Worst case, subscribe, check out everything there is. Join the Facebook group. If it's for you, great. If it's not for you, we'd love to have you stick around, check out the podcast and the tutorial. So again, to get your free 30-day trial, do nothing. Sit back, relax, sleep well, don't stress. Check your email first thing tomorrow, and you'll have an email that gives you a link specifically to start a free 30-day trial. If you are in a situation when you're at a church and you have a team that you want to provide access, we have team accounts that you can do. We have individual trials, and you can pay individual monthly or annual as well too. But check your inbox tomorrow for the details on that. This has been a lot of fun. Again, thanks so much to Presonus for sponsoring this. Thanks to the Atom controller. I was slightly kidding, but not really, when I said send them a message and say thank you. It means a lot to me to be able to do this for you guys for free. And I can only do that because of great companies like Presonus stepping up to the plate and doing that. So thanks to Presonus. Check out the Atom controller. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm going to hang out and just kind of sign off in the chat. I'll leave the stream live for just a little bit, kind of as we wrap down tonight. If you have any questions about links, post them in the comment. Again, you'll get links tomorrow, first thing tomorrow morning, in your inbox, and you will also get a free 30-day trial, link to a free 30-day trial in your inbox as well, first thing tomorrow. So make sure you are subscribed in order to get to that. Make sure you registered for this webinar rather, and you will get that. So I will see you guys later. Hope you have a great rest of the week. Hope you have a great weekend. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.